Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Smishek's Custom Baits. Rick Smishek here. Today we're going to continue the discussion on chapter 2 of Knowing Bass. Um, Last week we talked about different types of learning, and I left one out for this week that bass do. And this video will probably be just a little bit shorter than the last one, but that's okay. And I will be referring to my notes frequently again, and I do that to make sure that I get my information correct. I don't want to misspeak, give out bad information, and my notes have it correct. So, and as you guys get older, you'll understand it's harder to remember everything. It's just part of getting older. But the last type of learning that we have is bass are adept at learning search images. Okay. Now that search image can be an actual like visual cue. Um, it can be something acoustic. It can be vibrations. It can be odors, or it can be a combination of the above. Um, like bass can be depending on the forage base. Bluegill are a pretty regular forage base for bass. So a search image for bass in lakes where that is the primary forage would be that visual image of the bluegill and the other sensory cues that the bluegill puts off, or the vibrations as it's swimming, as it's feeding, et cetera, et cetera. But they're very, very good at that sort of learning. So when we go to a new lake or new river, whatever, it's wise to do a little research and find out what different types of forage there are in those bodies of water, and then apply that to our fishing, to our lure selection. Years ago, I read in a magazine article that bass had a memory of somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 minutes. And for years, I fished with that in mind. Well, that's incorrect. Okay. Turns out that was not right. They did a study where they put bass in groups of 6, and they exposed them to a minnow style bait for 5 minutes. There were an average of 24 strikes by each group of fish in that in that 5 minutes, and most of those strikes came in the first 3 minutes. Right. Then they took and they separated those groups of bass into 2 groups, and one group they exposed them again in groups of 6 in 2 weeks, and the response to that same lure 2 weeks later was 10% of what it was the first time. That's 2 weeks later. Okay. The other group of 6 groups of bass, they waited for 3 months and exposed them again, and it was pretty similar. It was some of the fish had I don't want to say forgotten, but they struck the lure again a little bit more frequently than the other set of bass did at 2 weeks, but it was still probably only 12% or so, according to the graph I saw. So this is, for me, that was an eye opener, right? I mean, you can't just wait, 15, 20 minutes and go through the same lure and expect to start catching those fish again, because odds are that's just not going to happen unless you're running into one of those fish that are so stupid that they just don't learn. And in fact, Texas explored the idea of creating a strain of largemouth bass that just don't learn about lures. Okay, so they'd be easier to catch. But I guess that didn't pan out because they didn't end up doing it. But it would have been cool if you could just go back there and just keep catching the same fish over and over. But that also would have taken the challenge out of fishing, you know. So it would be like God mode in a video game. God mode's fun for a few minutes, but that novelty wears off pretty quickly. So I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. But this is kind of why, as fishermen, we keep buying new lures, I think. And it also, you know what, it also makes a perfect excuse to tell our significant other why we need that new lure when we already have 100 of them in our tackle box, you know. um, it's also probably why I um, keep buying new molds. Well, part of the reason why. Um, another part of that reason why, so I have different stuff to show you guys. Let's talk about some learning curves. Okay, I mentioned in last week's video that bass don't learn as quickly as some other fish do. The learning curves for fish varies by what species they are. Striped bass, channel catfish, and carp learn relatively quickly. Right? Figure the trash fish, carp, well, they're better at this than bass are. And when it comes to bass, smallmouth, spotted, and largemouth, that's the order in which the learning curve, how quickly they learn. Bass are at the bottom of that list. Okay. Bluegill and northern pike learn slower than even the largemouth bass do. And what they were doing in this study was they were using electrical stimulation to see if fish would would learn to avoid it. And as part of that study, the researchers determined that yellow perch were untrainable. They just never learned. They just never learned to avoid the electrical stimulus. So, you know, maybe we can use that to our advantage if we're fishing for perch. You know, I thought that was kind of funny actually. They were untrainable. Because the idea to me of training fish seemed kind of silly, but that's associative learning. Okay, and in this case, yellow perch were not able to associate the behavior with getting shocked, but other fish were. In fact, most fish were, as far as what was the information in the book, those different species. When it comes to instincts, bass, they grow too quickly and they mature too quickly to be able to learn everything that they need to know. Some stuff has to be instinctive. So their brains at birth are hardwired for certain things. Things like eating fish. Okay? They don't have to learn to eat fish. They don't have to learn to, when they're first hatched, they don't have to learn to eat zooplankton. And as they grow a little bit, they don't have to learn to start eating insects in their larvae. These are things that are just hardwired into their brains. And as they get big enough, then they start eating fish. And that too is hardwired into their brains. Eating the crustaceans is another thing that's hardwired. How they eat, how they hunt is something they learn. If they don't learn to feed properly, they just starve to death. They die. And the fact that they're hardwired for certain things, it also limits what they can learn. Okay, like they could. Trying to think of an example here. I had one earlier when I was going over my notes and kind of running through this in my head. Now I can't remember what it was. There's that memory thing I talked about last week. But we can think of a bass's instincts as a lump of clay that, say, vaguely resembles a fish. And their learning ability slowly chips away at that lump of clay until we have a fish shape, whatever fish that they're feeding on in that particular body of water. But bass will come to prefer, based on the forage in any given body of water, bass will come to prefer certain types of food. If they're eating minnows, for example, they might discover that during the spawning season, while those small fish are spawning, that the females with the fat bellies are the best food to eat, because they're full of eggs. There's more nutrition there. They just might discover that's their most preferred food. It won't be available all year long, obviously, but bass can learn that. They can learn those types of things. What foods are the most nutritious and whatnot. So again, we have to look at what types of forage are in any given lake or river, stream, whatever that we're fishing that has bass in it. Or I almost said or any kind of fish, but we sort of do that for every kind of fish. But there's differences between each of the species as well, as far as this. If they did research like this book on, say, walleye, we'd probably have a lot of information different than this one here for the largemouth bass. So yeah, I think I've covered pretty much everything for chapter 2 that we want to cover. Chapter 2 is kind of lengthy as far as the information on the structure of a bass's brain and how it works, as far as like the synapses and all that stuff. If you guys want to know that, I guess I'll let you look that up on your own. But to me, that seemed like it was something that we probably didn't need to go over. It's probably going to be pretty boring, and it'd be something that I'd have a hard time remembering to get right anyways. But next week, we'll start on chapter 3. And one thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to make this too technical. Just wanted to give information out that we can apply as we're out there fishing. Easily apply, I should say. So with that said, if you liked what you saw, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share the videos, share them on Facebook with your friends, your neighbors, frenemies, whoever. That's one way that really helps the channel grow. It helps get the videos out in front of other people, gain subscribers and whatnot. So and I appreciate every time you guys do that, all the hours you watch, every minute that you guys watch, all the likes, whatnot. So all the subscriptions. So folks, until next time, tight lines, calm waters, and God bless.